So I'm talking today about scoring to picture. Picture is essentially moving images. Most of you know this, but just in case. Most often TV, film, advertising. Sometimes it could be like real life, but generally that's our meaning. And scoring is of course, applying the music that we write to picture. Production is the simple process of taking a musical idea and translating it into a presentable recording. I also hope that, while a lot of this is very much within the context of my work, scoring to picture, making music, I hope that there's stuff for those of you who are in different creative fields that resonates and helps you and inspires you in your process. So I am a composer by trade. Business has never been a thing. I never, when I was a kid, was like, I want to be an entrepreneur someday. I was always just wanted to make music, and business has been an effect of that. I'm a native Oregonian, grew up about an hour and a half south in a small town called Corvallis. Here's me at the age of 14 playing the electric guitar. I just want to tell you just like a brief 2-minute, my story kind of. So I have this close friend, many of you know, Eric Nordby. He and I in high school hung out all the time. Wrote music together and eventually started a really sweet band. Yeah, we were basically like nerd rock kids, I guess you would say. Or I was still kind of doing the punk rock thing, I guess, but poorly. So anyway, yeah, we started playing sweet shows, such as this one. Because of our music, we were able to impress pretty girls, one of which was the lovely Amy Hall, who's now my wife. Here she is with a massive leaf. So because of kind of the solidarity and self-belief that I found in my marriage, and as I kind of got out of the weird space of teenhood, I started taking more risks and being much more intentional with my music. As a result of that, along the way, I met this wonderful man named Joey Prather. Here he is pictured with Sasquatch. Joey Prather has a shop, his own music shop called Blue Scout Music. He's really insightful in regard to scoring to picture in the business. He mentored me for a couple years. I learned a ton from him, and insight I tucked away and used very much so later. One of the things that we did during my time with him was score Levi's "Oh Pioneers," which I'll play for you now.
Pioneers, oh pioneers, come my tan-faced children, follow well in order, get your weapons ready. Have you your pistols? Have you your sharp-edged axes, pioneers, oh pioneers? For we cannot tarry here. We must march, my darlings. We must bear the brunt of danger. We, the youthful, sinewy races, all the rest on us depend. Pioneers, oh pioneers. Oh, you youths, Western youths, so impatient, full of action, full of manly pride and friendship. Plain I see you, Western youths, see you tramping with the foremost. Pioneers, oh pioneers. We debouch upon a newer, mightier world, varied world, fresh and strong the world we seize. Pioneers, oh pioneers.
So shortly after I helped Joey with this, and we wrote it together. Joey kind of relocated his business down south, and our tenure kind of came to an end. We still collaborate together, but not as much as we did during that time. He was kind enough to allow me to use this spot in my own marketing endeavors, which I mean, creatives, especially back then, creatives like thought this was really cool, and they, I could get like anyone's attention that, you know, basically like anyone kind of in my little niche in my creative pocket was really excited about this and wanted to talk to me and maybe work with me when they heard that I did it. The problem was I had no interest in like big marketing campaigns and running a company. All this in steps, oh, too far. In steps Ryan Wines, handsome man, standing in the back. Very much the yin to my yang, very much like a businessman. He's very creative as well, but he thrives and enjoys the process of building human systems and all that stuff, and has been a really great partner. Pictured here with Eric Nordby, who was my buddy in high school way back in the day. He is now our senior music supervisor and is still a very close friend. So it's because of all this that I had the chance to start Marmoset. We're a creative agency in Southeast Portland of about 20. We create and source music for picture. So, and of course, it's because of Marmoset that I'm able to be here with you all today. So thank you so much for your time, braving the storm. Okay, oh yeah, and here's a picture of my wife and I with our 7-month-old baby boy. What's up? Okay, so for Christmas last year, Marmoset went on a fun little field day in an afternoon, and we picked up a tree. Our good friends at Story and Heart, a video licensing platform, they were kind enough to bring out a camera crew, and they shot. They got this really cool shot. They ended up showing it in slow motion, but it's a side profile shot of us just carrying a Christmas tree. It's a bunch of there's some new faces, and it's not exactly the crew we have now, but plenty of us are in it, and it's just a really fun shot. The tree just crosses across the frame. Because of the fact that there's no real clear cadence to the shot, we found that we were able to put a lot of different kinds of music against it. Almost any conceivable track had something to kind of contribute. So this is a really good case study. What I want to do is sort of, if you don't already believe, persuade you the importance and the significance of how much music can affect the emotional experience you have when you watch pictures. So I'm going to play 4 different tracks against this. Try not to get lost in the music. Try to watch picture and really focus on the emotional. It's almost as if every character has a completely different emotional, you almost think they're feeling something different from track to track. In one spot, they might feel angry. In another, they might seem really excited and passionate. So it's a fun little exercise. To get the first one out of the way, touching. Next one is sad and somber. And this one, I want you to sort of focus on the tree's plight. Shout out to our friends here in town, Federale, on this next one. Salty, gritty, and determined. Okay, last one. Thanks for bearing with me. Tough and brutal. So when I was a kid, like many musicians in this room, I wasn't, when I sit down in my bedroom or go play on stage or in a practice room with my friends, it was always very much about my own experience, my own narrative, wrestling with my own emotions, trying to express my own ideas. All this changes in scoring to picture. It's not about your own self-expression. It's almost, you might say it's about other expression. To do it well, you have to be really committed and really focused, listen very critically. You have to be humble because you're using your powers to someone else's gain. And you have to study really hard. On a simple level, the composition, the music is very important, clearly. But if you don't arrange it, if you don't produce it and present it in the right way, it will be ineffective. So in this context, in the recording age, where we're able to, we have this immense power to be able to just write this music so easily and post it to picture. It's like both sides are equally important. Some of the stuff that I do and some of the parts of my process I feel like are very unquantifiable and abstract and a little bit hard to grapple with. So we're going to put those aside for a minute, and we're going to talk about some of the stuff that's a little bit more technical, a little bit easier to process, and then we'll dive down deeper. So being a product of the Pacific Northwest, very much in and of this beautiful green environment. Also, having kind of come up through the indie rock paradigm, having grown up listening to that kind of music and being really into it, I have certain things I really like. I like live musicians, for starters. I like hearing sounds that aren't perfectly controlled and isolated in different parts of a mix. I like things bleeding together and sort of being both discernible and yet I love the humanity in music. I also love distortion. I love things that sound old and even sometimes I think production, like bad production, sounds really cool. So I might compare that to a classic American station wagon. And if I were, there's a track a buddy of mine, David, wrote that I feel like sums up a musical version of what this wagon looks like. So kind of going for like the quirky fun, summer vacation vibe, right? Dad's in the front, kids are in the back kicking each other. But notice the grit and the imperfection that was recorded on like a 4-track, I think. And that's very much like, I think, what I would consider my native tongue, so to speak. Like, if left to my own devices, I would just swim around in that weird production world for a long time. The problem is it only represents a small portion of the music you actually hear that is viable in the commercial world. There's a lot of other stuff happening. If I were to pick like an extreme opposite to the Wagoneer, I might pick this beautiful car. Notice how photography-wise the angle is tight and low and the car feels like it's massive and all the lines are clean and perfect and the colors are vivid and loud. Everything's larger than life. The exact same thing, all these things I just said happen in the same way. These concepts are also applied to music. If I were to imagine a runway track that would have been playing alongside this car while it was being initially released, I think it would sound like this. So this is obviously, a study, right? Like, not necessarily this track, but really punchy kick drums and huge synthesizers. It's all really fun stuff, but you have to work at it. You have to learn how sidechaining compressors works and all these different technical skills that are very, very sort of dark art, and to some extent, I would say the Wagoneer stuff is actually a lot for me. It's not just for me. I think it like embraces production naive imperfection, and whereas the Audi is like very engineered, intricate. You're basically recreating a sense of humanity in these robots. So that's one kind of learning. And the next kind of learning is I might call myself a guitar player in recovery. Well, I love my roots as a guitar player that got me where I am. Guitar players are known for being square, especially the ones that come up through the rock world, because it's like a very direct rock is about just like simple, effective hooks, right? It's not about like interwoven, subtle, complex melodies. It's more about songwriting, and the guitar is a tool to support the lyricist to some extent. Also, the guitar is not a really it's like the classical player figures it out, and definitely people do really intricate, complex things on the guitar, but it's not necessarily as easy as it might be on, say, piano. So here's a really simple country song. It's like 6 seconds of it or something like that, and it's just a simple example of what a guitar player might write. So there, it's like a melody and chords, right? Very, very simple. So yeah, back to the piano. Imagine, I mean, for those of you who play piano, there's 10 fingers. All the notes are right in front of you. More than likely, if you take piano in our culture, or you play piano in our culture, you've studied classical music or jazz, and so all of a sudden your frame of reference is totally different than a 22-year-old kid that plays in rock bands, right? You're like thinking about interweaving melodies and subtlety. This is a great example of something a really intelligent composer might write that came up through that idiom. So as you can see now, not only do I have to learn how to stop using so much distortion, but I also have to learn how to think a little bit more thoughtfully and push myself into new realms in terms of how I arrange music and how I think about it entirely. So that relates to this picture, family photo. Here's my wife pictured with her parents and sisters. This is a classic production music example of arranging. So basically, every piece of your mix wants to be placed intelligently and intentionally compared to all the other pieces of your mix. Same thing's true here. If all these people were awkwardly piled on top of each other, standing single file, you wouldn't be able to see or experience them very clearly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the same track for you twice. The first time, it's as it was originally presented. There are 3 clear parts that I want you to focus on. One is the piano and the pad on the top. One is the electric guitar in the middle. And the third is the bass on the bottom. As you are listening, consider being on a street corner, or actually not, that's the next one, sorry. Imagine being in a quiet room. And you were having a conversation with someone and you were listening very closely to them and trying to hear every word they say. And it's easy. You can just hear it. You don't have to work. The same thing should be true as you listen to each one of these elements, the piano pad, the electric guitar, and the bass. If you focus on any one of them, they should be clearly audible, and you shouldn't have to work to hear them. So I'll play that for you a couple times. And once again. So now I just opened up this session, and I took the piano and the pad, as you can see in the picture, and I brought them down and I put them right on top of the electric guitar. And then I took the bass from the bottom of the mix and I moved it up in frequency and put it in the same octave as the electric guitar. So now we have all these things sandwiched right in the middle. So again, consider as you're listening, being now on a very busy street. And you're listening to someone try to talk to you and you're really focused on them and they're just shrouded in like noise and you just can't hear what the heck they're saying. The same thing if you listen to this a few times, you should definitely be able to pick that up. Try to focus in on the piano or the guitar or the bass and just feel how it's kind of shrouded. One more time. So, okay, for the another example, this is a track I wrote about maybe 4 or 5 years ago with my friends at Juliet Zulu here in Portland, their production company / agency. This was kind of a lost leader, like short video we put together. That basically was like a love story. I'm actually, forgive me, I should preface, I'm not showing this to picture because I don't want you to be distracted. I want you to focus on the music. But I want to also give you some context. So it's basically like a love story, these 2 characters traveling around through Portland and experiencing life. And they kind of almost cross paths, but not quite. But they're both having, it's all framed in this very joyous, sort of exciting, fun musical landscape. But right at the end of the piece, finally, they're both on their bikes and they make eye contact and the music just blossoms. So I'm going to show you like 10 seconds before that climax when their eyes lock, and then a few seconds after, and we're going to grab little moments, and I'm going to slowly add one like the rhythm section and the guitar and the bass and so forth. So we're going to start with the guitar and the bass. I would say, talking about emotionally what these are doing, I would say they're giving you a sense of movement, simple movement. You can tell there's some youth, like they're young and they're maybe cool kids and they inquisitive, optimistic, but we really don't have that much information at this point. It makes more sense in a minute, forgive me. So I always think that transition to electric guitar is kind of like shocking. Anyway, so the drums are next. Very much drums are huge, right? They have a huge effect on how much energy. It's like the drums are a huge part of a rock band, especially way more than you would think. But any popular recording, pretty much where there's drums. You wouldn't really, if you changed them and replaced them with a bad performance or really stupid drum samples, if it's hip hop or something, you'd be shocked how stupid it sounds all of a sudden. So in this case, we're getting just this driving, pulsing quarter note thing that's completely, all of a sudden, now instead of our characters being young and optimistic, they're also like clearly on a mission, they're passionate. Also notice there's this big moment where the drummer sort of like rises up and there's a big cymbal swell, and that's our lift. Without that stuff, that musical subtlety to the drums, we wouldn't be able to get anywhere near as effective of an emotional lift right there. So guitars, bass, and drums. So next thing I'm going to show you is air. I'm going to add the air. This is actually a few seconds earlier in the track, but I think the air is more present there, so I want you to understand it clearly. Basically what I'm calling air is it's a mix of my voice and like a vocal choir synth and a melodica. And it's basically all the instruments you've heard so far really kind of right here. They're very close to your face. They're bright and relatively clear. You can hear exactly what they're playing. This stuff is almost happening if you think of music in the third dimension, right? Not just left side, right side, low frequencies, high frequencies, but also depth of field. So I would say the air is happening behind the drum set and above the drum set. And there's a bunch of stuff we do in the production process to try to create that sense of depth. What we get from this, most notably emotionally speaking, is the sense of like, oh, something special, something magical is happening here. So the last thing I'm going to show you, we're calling it pixie dust. This is this term we throw around a lot at Marmoset. Basically, it's this really rapid fire arpeggio. Arpeggio, for those of you who don't know, is almost like a chord, but voiced as a melody. Rather than all of the notes at once, they're scattered over time. So it's happening as a subdivision of that driving kick drum. It's adding to that urgency. It's instead of going k, 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 it's going 1E into 2E into 3E into 4E, and it really adds this new layer of like urgency and movement. It's almost as now, so first we found out our characters were young and optimistic, then we found out that they were on a mission, and then we found out that there was something magical going on, and now we almost get the sense that they're on a mountaintop, that they're like these heroic characters that are doing something really significant. So now this is where we get weird. So I'm new. Ryan's been waiting for this because he knows how hippy dippy I can be. So I'm newer to music production, right? I've been doing it for like 7 years, long enough to be comfortable with it, but it's very technical. It's not second nature to me. I have to think about it and be very purposeful with my decisions. Music's something I've been doing for maybe closer to 15 or 20 years, so it's very internalized and intuitive. I don't have to spend time thinking about it critically and trying to, second guess myself. So a big part of my process is protecting that. I'm not going to talk to you about the subtleties of music theory and how I think about different chord changes and all that because I almost don't want to because it's like the sacred part of my process. It's a part of my process I don't want to touch because like somehow because of the fact that I studied it so much before I learned production, makes it so it's just very intuitive and that's good. I don't want. So there's this metaphor, the horse and the rider. Basically, our bodies are super complex. We're absorbing lots and lots and lots of information, and our higher consciousness is only really able to grab a small portion of that. All the rest of it is swirling in other parts of us. So for this example, the rider is the higher consciousness, and the horse is the animal-like gut, intuitive part of us. So imagine these two on the battlefield. The rider, so to speak, is sort of the captain, steering the ship, asking really critical questions, being very pragmatic. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? Maybe very intentionally pushing the horse into a dangerous situation to do something heroic, maybe drawing the horse away from danger to do something safe, sort of in service of somebody else's moment. Same thing's true in music. All the technical stuff we've talked about, plus a whole bunch of other stuff we talked about, what the client wants, what picture is demanding, all that stuff. It's all like happening in my conscious head. I'm sort of like check and balancing the creative process, saying, is this working? Is it clicking? The horse, on the other hand, is the improviser. It's the one who really likes to be surprised and shocked and have to figure out how to get out of a sticky situation, to look around at his surroundings and just intuitively react spontaneously. So both these characters, the horse and the rider, I think the longer they work together, the more they congeal and become one and can read each other's minds, right? So that's positive for the horse in particular, because the horse's creative process and ability to bring the magic is dependent on the rider, the brain, not constantly like bothering him and telling him, no, you're not doing it right. No, you're not doing it right. So this is the process of maturing and scoring to picture. Being able to discern what parts of you are off in outer space and what parts of you are actually resonating with what you've been asked to do. And not only what you've been asked to do, but the parts of you that are that you've been hired to just be yourself too, right? So all this process, setting up microphones, getting channels live, getting all the technical stuff ready and settled, is the single most exciting part of my process. It's what keeps me coming back. It's what makes it fun. I think just like any musician, the technical stuff is all in service of the horse, right? I would say, it depends on the job, it depends on the situation, but fundamentally speaking, to some degree, I'm almost waiting for that moment when I can kind of turn off. It sounds weird, and it might not be quite as black and white as I'm making it sound, but it's pretty close. Like, I actually get to the point where all the technical stuff is dealt with, and then I actually turn off. I actually try to turn off my brain. I'll kind of just let myself wander in this weird sort of other state of creative space for a while, and then I'll turn my brain back on and be like, okay, are we 100 miles off course right now? Are we doing it right? Are we getting where we need to go? And then I'll shut my brain back off, and I'll just, hopefully the longer I do it, the closer I get, and the more, hopefully, the ideal is that the more you do it and the more times you check in, you're getting closer and closer to your objective, and to a point where you have a viable recording that you can present. So I'm going to show you now, wrong way. I'm going to show you a quick 2 minutes of picture, of my music against picture. So this is, there's this documentary called A Film About Coffee. You could probably guess what it's about. It was made by a production company down in in San Francisco called Avocados and Coconuts. They're really brilliant and wonderful to work with. And basically, they made this really cool documentary about it. Heavily features Kova and Stumptown and a bunch of other Blue Bottle, a bunch of other people along the West Coast in the craft coffee world. They take you through the whole process and talk to you about the philosophies, and you go down to the farms and meet the farmers. It's a really wonderful movie. I highly recommend it. Actually, we're just going to watch the whole thing right now. Just kidding. So we're watching the first 2 minutes. You're going to see a whole bunch of micro, really tight shots of these beautiful like brewing methods, all set in like kind of like a black and orange background. It's all very inviting and warm, and very much resonates with the obsessed coffee drinker who doesn't want to wake up in the morning except for that cup of coffee that gets them started. And all the more so, right, for these craft coffee people, because they're so obsessed with it and they're so passionate about it. They literally in the movie they talk about not wanting to get out of bed, and then they think, oh, but I could have coffee. So there's this very romantic aspect to it, right? So the music is reflecting that. The music is like warm and enveloping and inviting and very subliminal, right? Like this is a very slow moving. A lot of the shots are actually slow motion, kind of like the slow mo tree thing. So I'm trying not to like. I'm trying to really, really help people connect with this emotional experience, this warm morning cup of coffee that's really inviting, but I don't want them to notice that I'm doing it in this case. So this is an interesting example because it's like the music's not really loud and extravagant. It's understated, but also there's very little sound design. It's very much, I think, a good example of a piece of work I'm proud of. So there's that. There's the emotional thing. The other thing that we really wanted to connect with was the, excuse me, the mad scientists. Like these craft coffee people are obsessive compulsive, like they just make the same cup of coffee and over and over and over again, and they train for these competitions. I mean, it's a very intense and committed pursuit to make the perfect cup of coffee. That's the impression you get. So kind of right in the middle of the mix, kind of sitting on top of all this like washed out, like kind of warm blanket stuff, there are these two like random guitar notes just kind of like undulating, and there's this, I don't know what it is about them that makes them feel like somehow they resonate with the notion of like alchemy or yeah, like weird dark science stuff. I don't know why, but they're random and kind of displaced, and there's something sort of heady about them. So those are the two things I want you to pay attention to: the burgeoning, rising, flowering, blossoming stuff happening out of the music, the cellos and the vocal samples that have been manipulated, and all this stuff swirling around, and then these two guitar notes that are anchoring. The music also really ebbs and flows and grows into certain moments and then sits back at certain moments. And notice how we very intentionally, anytime there's a rise, it's not haphazard. We very much pick, a shot, or we feel like there's this breath for some reason, and so we want to capture it with music. So I heard this photographer say that art is sensitivity. That anyone who is being truly sensitive and present in a moment is taking part in this act we call art making. I had a instructor, a professor in college, who would take us out on the patio and he would make us snap in time with the environment we were in, which I always thought was pretty weird, especially at the time. And I don't think it's that black and white. I don't think it's that simple. But the sentiment, I think, is really right on. That he's saying, "Hush, listen, be in this moment with me." There's a cadence. There's movement all around you. What is it? My dad is kind of a mystic. Spends a lot of time meditating and thinking very critically about his own emotional state, what he's feeling, why he's feeling it. As a young man, he would never tell me to stop being a dumbass or try harder. He was always telling me, like he was always trying to analyze me and figure out, if he could, what was driving my actions, if I was doing something that concerned him or if I was being lazy. He was always trying to get to the heart of the matter and say, why is Brian acting the way he's acting? Maybe I can help him to identify that in himself, that emotional process, and write it. So I grew up very much impacted by that, and all this stuff kind of, I feel like it's infiltrated how I think about my life, my music. I'm arrogant with the best of them. I can get distracted and self-obsessed just like anybody else, but my ideal is the hush. It's finding the hush, being still, soaking in the hush. I just hope that for the rest of my life, that I'll be lucky enough to have lots and lots of chances to fill the hush with music. Thank you.